They spilled coffee on her, laughed, and downgraded her to economy just because she was black. That's how this flight started. No warnings, no explanations. Just a black woman in a crisp navy blue suit, walking into first class with confidence, and being treated like she didn't belong the second she stepped on board. Before the plane even left the gate, a flight attendant questioned her ticket. A man already sat in her seat and refused to move. And when she calmly asked why, they told her, loud enough for others to hear, there'd been a system adjustment. No apology, no refund, just a subtle shove toward the back of the plane. She didn't argue. She didn't raise her voice. But from that moment on, the cabin became a stage for something much bigger than a seating mix-up. Whispers, eye rolls, someone filming, another passenger asking to move away from her for comfort. And through it all, she sat, stained, silenced, and underestimated. What none of them knew was who she really was. But you're not ready for that reveal just yet. Because this story isn't about a woman who snapped. It's about what happens when power stays quiet long enough to let injustice speak first. So stay with us. Watch to the end. And before we dive in, where in the world are you watching from? Let us know in the comments. What would you have done if you saw this unfold in front of you? If stories of justice, accountability, and unforgettable twists keep you hooked, like this video, hit subscribe, and turn on notifications. The truth is about to hit 35,000 feet. The late afternoon sun filtered through the high glass panes of JFK's Terminal 4, casting golden streaks across the sleek, polished floors. The scent of fresh espresso drifted from a nearby cafe, mingling with the low hum of flight announcements echoing through the terminal's vast interior. It was the kind of crisp winter day that made travelers grateful to be headed anywhere warm. In the quiet corner near Gate 16, Maya Evans stood tall and composed in a tailored navy blazer, slim black slacks, and leather heels that clicked with purpose as she approached the boarding area. In her left hand, she carried a minimalist designer briefcase. In her right, her boarding pass, Seat 1A, First Class, Flight 727 to San Francisco. Maya wasn't flashy, but she didn't need to be. There was a quiet authority in her presence, a confidence honed over years of navigating boardrooms and investment rounds. As a founder and CEO of Ardentix Financial, a rapidly rising fintech startup making waves across both coasts, she was no stranger to high-stakes meetings or luxury travel. She had just wrapped up a 4-day investor summit in Manhattan that ended with a new round of funding and a potential international expansion. This flight wasn't just a return trip, it was a victory lap. As she joined the short line of first-class passengers, Maya took in the usual tableau. A man in a tailored gray suit talking loudly into his Bluetooth earpiece, a couple wearing matching monogrammed luggage tags, sipping complimentary champagne, a stylish young woman in oversized sunglasses scrolling through Instagram. The atmosphere was subdued, comfortable, exclusive, just the way the airline marketed its first-class experience. Then came the shift, subtle at first. The gate agent, blonde, mid-40s, lips pressed into a tight smile, greeted the couple ahead of Maya with warmth, even offered to help with their bags. When it was Maya's turn, the warmth disappeared. "Boarding pass, please," the agent said with professional sharpness, no eye contact. Maya handed over her ticket without hesitation. "Thank you," she replied, tone polite but steady. The agent scanned it once, then frowned and scanned it again. Her eyes narrowed slightly as she looked Maya up and down. "Just a moment," she said. "I need to confirm something with the system." Maya arched an eyebrow. "Is there an issue?" she asked, her voice calm but firm. The agent didn't answer directly. Instead, she tapped at her tablet for longer than necessary, glanced over her shoulder at a colleague, and leaned in to whisper something. Maya could already feel it coming. That familiar burn of scrutiny beneath the skin, the way a room could go quiet without going silent, the way eyes could settle on her not with curiosity, but with judgment. She'd felt it in boardrooms where her qualifications were questioned, in interviews where her tone was called too confident, in every room where she had to be twice as competent to earn half the benefit of the doubt. After a long pause, the gate agent finally looked up. "Your seat has been reassigned," she said. Her voice was neutral, but her eyes weren't. You'll be in 24C today. Maya blinked, the moment registering with crystal clarity. That's economy, she said, already knowing the answer. I paid for 1A weeks ago. There's been a last-minute change, the agent replied. A high-priority passenger requested the seat. The system adjusted automatically. Maya took a step closer, lowering her voice, but making it clear she expected a resolution. That's not how upgrades work. If someone else wants my seat, they can buy their own. I booked that seat, and it was confirmed yesterday. The agent's lips thinned into a practiced expression of regret. I'm sorry, but there's nothing I can do. If you'd like to take your seat in economy, we'll be closing the doors soon. Passengers behind Maya began to shift impatiently. She could hear one of them whisper, holding up the line. Another muttered something about entitled travelers. Maya didn't flinch. She took out her phone and pulled up the confirmation email, scrolling to the line that read seat 1A confirmed. She held up without a word. The agent barely glanced at it. Please step aside, ma'am. And there it was. The quiet dismissal. The denial of presence without acknowledgement of identity. She stepped aside, but not to accept defeat. Her eyes scanned the terminal until they landed on the flight supervisor, a man in a crisp navy suit checking a tablet by the gate door. She approached him with purpose. Excuse me. I need to speak with someone about a seating issue. The supervisor turned, caught off guard by her direct tone. Of course, ma'am. What seems to be the problem? I booked 1A. I confirmed it. But I've just been reassigned to economy without explanation. The agent mentioned a system change, but I'm not seeing any indication of that on my reservation. He looked over her ticket, glanced at the screen, then frowned slightly. I see it's a confirmed booking. Strange, he murmured, already beginning to sound uncomfortable. Let me check something. He stepped away and disappeared behind a side door. As she waited, the man now seated in 1A, white, mid-40s, thinning hair, loafers, and a smug sense of entitlement, peeked out of the cabin and caught Maya's eye. Something wrong? He asked, not bothering to hide the smirk in his voice. You tell me, Maya replied. He shrugged. They just told me the seat was available. Lucky, I guess. Maya gave a cold smile. Very. When the supervisor returned, his expression had shifted. MS. Evans, I'm afraid we can't move the other passenger now. We're moments from closing the cabin. We can offer you a refund and a travel voucher. That won't be necessary, Maya said, pulling out her phone. She dialed a number. Hi, this is Maya Evans. I need to speak with Jeff Landry in legal. Let him know it's regarding corporate policy enforcement at Sky Atlantic, Flight 727. Yes, it's urgent. The supervisor paled slightly. Behind her, the gate agent's demeanor changed. The air inside the aircraft grew heavier as Maya stepped past the curtains separating first class from the rest of the cabin, each footfall echoing like a slow insult down the narrow aisle. The supervisor, clearly shaken by her phone call, had relented just enough to offer a gesture of dignity, an empty exit row seat in Economy Plus, which, as he awkwardly phrased it, offered extra legroom and premium service. Maya had said nothing, only nodded coolly and walked, the silence behind her louder than any confrontation could have been. As she reached her new seat, 14C, she took note of the surrounding passengers. A young man in joggers tapping on a gaming console, a woman in yoga pants staring at her warily, a middle-aged businessman across the aisle glancing up over the rim of his reading glasses. There was a flicker of recognition in his eyes, but he said nothing. Maya placed her briefcase under the seat and sat down, smoothing her slacks as she adjusted the armrest. A flight attendant passed by, this one younger, brunette, with a distracted smile, and handed her a plastic cup of lukewarm water without a word. No welcome, no acknowledgement, just a glance, then gone. From first-class luxury to silence and styrofoam in less than 10 minutes. Across the aisle, a whispered voice slipped through the hum of boarding noise. She must have tried to sneak into first, someone murmured. People do it all the time. Another voice chimed in louder, clearly wanting to be heard. They let anyone think they're entitled now. Probably one of those influencer types. Maya turned her head slowly. eyes narrowing slightly at the man in 14D, a portly executive with slicked back hair and the kind of smug self-assurance born from generations of inherited comfort. He wasn't speaking directly to her, but his tone was unmistakably performative, as though he needed the cabin to know where he stood. "I mean, if you want to fly first, you book ahead and pay like the rest of us," he said to no one in particular. Simple as that. Entitlements gotten out of control. His seatmate nodded agreeably, then turned back to their magazine. Maya took a steadying breath and reminded herself who she was. She had weathered worse. She had been mistaken for a secretary at her own shareholder meeting. She had been asked to fetch coffee during a panel she was leading. She had been told, by another woman, no less, that she spoke too articulately for someone with her background. Every one of those moments had tried to chip away at her dignity, but none had broken it. This wouldn't either. Still, it wasn't just about her anymore. Something about the way the airline staff had moved, deliberate, rehearsed, complicit, told her this wasn't an isolated incident. This was systemic. A few rows ahead, a mother leaned in toward her teenage daughter and whispered something. The girl turned around in her seat, looked at Maya, then rolled her eyes and mouthed seriously before turning back. Maya resisted the urge to react. Her phone buzzed on silent. A text from her COO. "Tell me you're joking." Then another from her executive assistant. "We're drafting a formal complaint. Want us to loop in media?" Maya stared at the messages, fingers hovering over the keyboard. Not yet, she thought. Not while I'm still on this flight. Suddenly, the cabin lights flickered as the intercom crackled overhead. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard Sky Atlantic Flight 727 with service to San Francisco. We'll be closing the doors momentarily. Please take your seats and ensure your devices are in airplane mode." The captain's voice was calm, routine. Maya noted the name, Captain Ellis, unfamiliar. She wondered briefly if he'd been part of the decision to reassign her seat. Her gut told her no. The real power moves always came from the shadows. As the plane pulled away from the gate, the man in 14D leaned over again, his voice now intentionally loud. "You know," he said, "I work with the airline's consulting division. I see people like her trying to jump lines all the time. It's not about race, it's about rules." His eyes flicked toward Maya, daring her to respond. She didn't. She simply turned to the window and looked out at the tarmac, watching the ground staff shrink as the plane taxied forward. She had no intention of rising to the bait. She would not let ignorance bait her into emotion. Her silence, carefully chosen, was her resistance. Once in the air, service began. Flight attendants moved through the aisles, distributing pretzels and drinks. Maya noticed that others around her received two options. She was offered one. "Only cranberry juice left," the same brunette attendant said, without making eye contact. Maya accepted the cup and smiled with deliberate slowness. "Thank you," she said, her voice crisp and unyielding. The attendant blinked, unsure whether the thanks was genuine or pointed. It was both. Then came the next wave. At the far end of the aisle, a man in a navy suit approached the row. He looked down at Maya and narrowed his eyes. "Excuse me, are you Maya Evans?" She glanced up cautiously. "Yes. And you are?" "Jonathan Klein," he said, extending a business card. "Senior VP of Finance at Ravenex Capital. I've followed your work." His voice was low, professional. "Saw you speak at TechFront last spring. Didn't expect to see you back here." Maya offered a small smile, pocketed the card, and nodded. "Nor did I." Klein hesitated, then said, "Something tells me you weren't placed here by accident." Maya didn't answer, but her expression said enough. As Klein moved away, several nearby passengers took note. One woman asked, "Wait, who is she?" Another pulled out her phone and whispered something to her partner. Recognition was starting to ripple through the cabin, but Maya remained silent. The damage had already been done. It wasn't about clearing her name anymore. It was about exposing a pattern. Back in first class, the man in 1A had finished his scotch and was now reclining, flipping lazily through a newspaper. The seat that Maya had purchased, the one she had planned to use to review documents and finalize slides for the pitch in San Francisco, was now occupied by someone who'd simply asked. She wondered if he even knew the cost of that seat. Not the monetary one, but the dignity he'd stolen by sitting in it. A luxury handed to him, an entitlement unearned. Maya leaned her head against the side of the cabin and closed her eyes for a moment. She didn't need validation. She didn't need apologies. Her fingers moved swiftly but gracefully, analyzing projections, highlighting anomalies, and annotating key variables with the same quiet precision that had built her company from nothing but an idea in a co-working space. Yet the hum of tension lingered around her, a static charge in the air, subtle but present. She could feel the occasional glances from across the aisle, the way conversations paused just slightly as she reached for her drink or adjusted her seat. It wasn't new. It was almost predictable, an unspoken performance of passive judgment she had learned to navigate with poise. But today, the performance was louder than usual. Across from her, the portly man in 14D shifted in his seat and leaned toward the woman beside him. Their whispers, though hushed, carried with them a weight of disdain. "She's still on that iPad," he said with a tone that mingled disbelief and mockery. "Pretending to work on something important. Probably playing solitaire." The woman chuckled softly. "No one dressed like that is running a real company," she replied. "She's probably an assistant trying to look the part." Maya didn't flinch. Her eyes never left the screen, but her posture straightened slightly, her spine aligning with the seat's backrest in subtle defiance. She had heard these lines before, phrased differently, delivered by different mouths, but the implication was always the same: that she didn't belong, that she had to be pretending. A flight attendant with a forced smile stopped their row and leaned in toward the couple. "Is everything all right?" she asked. "Can I get you anything else?" The man in 14D gestured toward Maya with a smirk. "Actually, I was wondering if you could help this young lady here find the in-flight games. I think she's lost in those charts." The attendant chuckled softly, playing along without hesitation. "Oh, is that what it is?" she said, turning toward Maya with that same patronizing smile. "Need help with the Wi-Fi, sweetie?" Maya looked up slowly, her gaze calm but razor-sharp. "No," she said, her voice smooth and even. "I'm reviewing a merger valuation involving your parent company, but I'll be sure to call you if I get confused." The attendant blinked, startled by the precision of Maya's tone. The man beside her shifted uncomfortably. "Just a joke," he muttered, but his confidence had visibly cracked. Maya returned her eyes to her screen without another word. From behind, two passengers had clearly caught the exchange and began whispering. "She said merger valuation," one of them murmured. "You think she's some kind of exec?" The other scoffed. "Maybe she Googled those words." People fake credentials all the time, especially when they want attention. That statement stung, not because it was original, but because it was lazy. Dismissal wrapped in casual cynicism. Maya knew her resume by heart, not because she needed to recite it, but because people like this always needed proof. She had graduated magna cum laude from Stanford, served on economic advisory panels, built a SaaS product from scratch, and sold it by 32. She didn't need attention. She needed efficiency. Respect was just a byproduct of excellence, or at least it should have been. She took a sip of the cranberry juice, now warm and diluted, and stared out the window for a moment. The clouds below looked like silk dunes bathed in amber twilight, peaceful and unbothered. How easy it must be, she thought, to float above the noise without having to justify every inch of altitude. In first class, they were likely sipping Pinot Noir and discussing market trends like they owned the world. In economy, Maya, who did own part of the world they flew through, was being treated like a child who wandered into the wrong neighborhood. The captain's voice came over the intercom, announcing turbulence ahead. Maya instinctively fastened her seatbelt before the light came on. As the cabin jostled gently, the man in 14D clutched the armrest and grimaced. "Damn these bumpy flights," he muttered. "Hope the pilot knows what they're doing." His companion replied, "I heard we got one of those rookie co-pilots today. One of those diversity hires." She said it with a mocking tone, unaware or unconcerned that Maya could hear her. They're really trying to change the look of aviation. Not sure they're raising the standards while doing it. Maya inhaled deeply, willing herself not to respond. Not yet. The sting of their words mixed with the vibration of the aircraft, but she held firm. The brunette flight attendant returned a moment later with another round of beverages. She skipped Maya's row entirely. When Maya raised her hand, the attendant smiled tightly. "Oh, I didn't think you'd want anything else. You looked occupied." Maya tilted her head. "Actually, I'll take a sparkling water. With lemon." The attendant blinked again and nodded, caught off guard by the quiet insistence. Of course. She returned with the drink, but not before casting another glance at Maya's screen. This time, her eyes lingered on the names of the companies in bold. She looked away quickly, unsure what she had seen, or maybe unsure how to process it. Maya's phone buzzed again. Another message from her assistant. Sky Atlantic's executive liaison just reached out. Apparently, someone alerted the board. They're watching the situation live via internal reports. Maya smiled faintly. She hadn't sent anything herself. Someone else must have. Maybe Jonathan Klein. Maybe a silent observer in first class. The whisper network had started. The pressure was building. It always did, just before the drop. They had made their assumptions, spoken their judgments, and now believed themselves victorious in the small, invisible battle of social hierarchy. The man in 14D had gone quiet, his companion engrossed in a magazine article about real estate investments. The attendants moved mechanically down the aisles, collecting trash and offering beverages. But Maya noticed something odd. Her row was consistently skipped or served last. She had requested a lemon wedge nearly 30 minutes ago. It never arrived. Then came the moment that confirmed it wasn't accidental. The brunette flight attendant returned pushing the beverage cart, her eyes briefly locking with Maya's before flitting away. In her hands, she held a small tray with 2 cups of coffee, one black and one with cream. She passed drinks to rows 12 and 13, then stepped to Maya's aisle, balancing both cups carefully. "Sparkling water with lemon, right?" she asked, finally acknowledging Maya directly. Maya nodded once, her voice even. "Yes." The attendant reached to hand her the drink. Then suddenly, almost theatrically, the cup of black coffee in her other hand tilted forward and splashed across Maya's tray table. The dark liquid soaked through the edge of Maya's tablet case, splattered across the front of her blouse, and dripped into her lap, creating a chaotic constellation of heat and stains. There was a gasp from a woman in 13B. The man in 14D barked out a laugh. "Well, I guess now the charts are really ruined," he quipped. Maya froze, the sting of the coffee against her skin sharp but not scalding. The burn of humiliation sharper still. The attendant's expression shifted instantly, surprised, then embarrassed, then smug. "Oh no," she said, the words laced with mock concern. "I am so sorry. My hand just slipped. These carts are so unstable sometimes." Maya looked up, eyes narrowed but composed. "Please get me some napkins," she said, her voice low and cold. The attendant hesitated, then reached into a compartment and handed her 2 small paper squares. "That's all I've got right now. I can check the galley," she added half-heartedly. Maya took the napkins, dabbed her shirt carefully, then dried her tablet with the edge of her scarf. The screen still worked. Her blouse, however, was ruined. White silk, now stained along the collar and sleeves. She said nothing more. She didn't yell. She didn't ask for compensation. She simply returned the tablet to its case, locked her tray table, and folded her hands in her lap. Across the aisle, the same couple whispered again. "She's not even reacting," the woman said, trying to act all classy. "Maybe she's used to people cleaning up after her." The man laughed. "Or maybe she's just shocked someone stood up to her." The cruelty wasn't subtle anymore, it was gleeful. The act of dehumanizing her had become entertainment, a group exercise in dismantling dignity. And Maya knew exactly why. Her silence unnerved them. Her refusal to beg, to fight, to prove herself, it made her unreadable, and therefore dangerous. A different flight attendant, a man this time, older, with graying temples and a calm demeanor, walked by a few minutes later. He glanced at Maya's soaked blouse and the brown stain trailing down her seatbelt. "Was there a spill?" he asked, concerned. Maya nodded. "Coffee. Your colleague had trouble balancing the tray." The man frowned. "Did she offer you cleaning supplies? A change of seat?" "No," Maya said flatly. He hesitated, then whispered, "Would you like me to escalate this to the cabin supervisor?" Maya considered it for a long moment. Then she shook her head. "Not yet. Thank you." He nodded respectfully and moved on. Maya leaned back against the headrest, her mind not on the coffee, not on the laughter, not even on the insult. She was thinking about leverage, timing, exposure. She had come across these patterns before: discrimination disguised as accident, condescension painted with politeness. But the difference now was who she had become. Not just a successful entrepreneur, not just a name on a Forbes list. She had quietly built relationships with regulators, investors, and airline partners. She had a voice that could reach inside boardrooms, a signal that could ripple through social media in seconds. And they had no idea. Behind her, a voice piped up from the back rows. "Hey, flight crew. That woman spilled her drink. Might want to mop up before someone blames y'all for being racist or something." Laughter followed. Maya closed her eyes, inhaled through her nose, and exhaled slowly. She thought of her father's words, spoken when she got her first job in investment banking. "Control the room without raising your voice. Because if you lose your calm, they win twice." She opened her eyes again. Her calm remained, but her patience was growing thin. 10 rows ahead, a curtain rustled. Maya caught a glimpse of the man in 1A rising from his seat. He stretched, spoke briefly with a flight attendant, and then disappeared behind the galley curtain. A minute later, he returned, not to his seat, but toward hers. The aisle grew quiet as he approached. He stopped beside her row, glanced down at her ruined blouse, and smirked. "You look flustered," he said. "Need help finding a seat more your style?" The insult was clear, brazen, intended to spark something. Maya looked at him, finally letting her eyes show what her voice did not. "You're still sitting in my seat," she said quietly. "That part hasn't changed." His face twisted into mock offense. "Oh, I didn't know first class was reserved for," he let the sentence hang, like bait. Maya didn't take it. Maya's fingers moved slowly across her phone screen, not in haste, but with a calm precision of someone setting something irreversible into motion. She opened a secure folder labeled Equity Leverage, SA, double-checked the time-stamped email thread from the Sky Atlantic stakeholder group, and composed a brief, direct message to her legal liaison. Incident escalating. Full statement likely required. Record keeping in progress. Begin drafting shareholder alert under Title IX Advisory Clause. Await my green light. She hit send, locked the screen, and returned the phone to her briefcase. Around her, the silence had shifted into something far more telling than open mockery. Now it was the calculated stillness of a group who had chosen to do nothing. The man in 14D, so eager earlier to offer unsolicited commentary, now sat hunched over his armrest, pretending to read, but his occasional glances toward Maya's ruined blouse betrayed the satisfaction that still lingered on his face. His companion, the woman in the blazer 2 sizes too tight, hadn't said a word since the coffee incident, but Maya caught her watching with peripheral curiosity. Curiosity laced not with concern, but with quiet triumph. These weren't people simply indifferent to what had happened. These were people who had witnessed deliberate harm and chose silence because that harm confirmed something they already believed, that Maya didn't belong there, and the proof was in her humiliation. The brunette flight attendant who had caused the spill had vanished into the galley and hadn't returned for over 20 minutes. When she did reappear, she avoided Maya's row entirely. Maya noted how the passengers in first class were now being served a second round of wine, their laughter a soft hum floating from behind the curtain, a reminder that elsewhere, comfort continued uninterrupted. She also noticed how no one, not one flight attendant, not one supervisor, had approached her to follow up on the incident. At the front of the cabin, near the emergency exit, Two off-duty flight attendants sat in jump seats, chatting quietly with a male attendant who had earlier offered her a change of seat. As Maya watched, the man glanced back toward her, said something she couldn't hear, and the two women responded with a dismissive wave. One of them rolled her eyes. The other mouthed, "She's fine," as if Maya's dignity had a metric they were qualified to measure. The male attendant didn't push back. He simply nodded, turned his head, and resumed his conversation. The realization sank deeper. Not only had they seen what happened, they had chosen not to act. Not because they were afraid, not because they didn't know better, but because in their eyes, Maya's treatment was an injustice. It was inconvenience, a disruption to the rhythm they were used to, the unspoken rules that governed who deserved first-class empathy and who didn't. And Maya, to them, wasn't on the list. She had seen this type of collusion before. Not in uniforms, but in suits. She'd seen boards allow toxic executives to stay in power because their numbers looked good. She'd seen venture firms quietly blacklist female founders who pushed too hard, too loud, too soon. The enemy was never just one person. It was the system that surrounded them, made excuses for them, carried on without accountability. She had learned, the hard way, that the most dangerous thing in any room wasn't the aggressor. It was the witness who turned away. She took another sip of her now flat, sparkling water, ignoring the sticky residue along her lap, and began mentally cataloging every face. Row by row, seat by seat. The woman in 12A who had watched her be doused in coffee and lowered her window shade. The couple in 15C and D who had whispered and chuckled and then gone still. Even the teenage boy with the earbuds who had pulled one bud out to listen frowned briefly, then shoved it back in and pretended the cabin was silent again. Maya leaned slightly to the side and retrieved a small, leather-bound notepad from her bag. It was one of the few analog things she still used, reserved for critical observations. She opened it, clicked her pen, and began to write. Names, descriptions, sequence of events. She wrote not in anger, but in clarity. She wasn't documenting to complain. She was documenting to indict. And still no one came. The plane hit a small patch of turbulence. The seatbelt light blinked on. A mother with 2 children 3 rows back asked for an extra blanket. The request was met quickly. The crew was fully functional, just selectively responsive. Finally, someone from the flight crew appeared at her side. It wasn't the brunette. It was the senior flight attendant, a tall woman in her mid-50s with a neatly pressed uniform and a name tag that read A. Chapman. Her tone was rehearsed, her eyes unreadable. "Miss Evans," she began. Maya nodded once. "Yes. I understand there was a beverage spill earlier," Chapman said, the phrasing antiseptic. Not an apology, not an acknowledgement of fault, just a distant, clinical fact. "Would you like to fill out an incident card?" Maya considered it. "Will it be filed?" she asked. "Officially?" Chapman hesitated. "It will be noted in the cabin log, which is reviewed post-flight." Maya nodded slowly, then took the card and placed it on her tray table. She didn't fill it out. "Not yet." "Thank you," she said coolly. "I'll hold on to it." Chapman didn't press. She gave a stiff nod and walked away, as if completing a task she was forced to perform. Maya watched her disappear down the aisle, the faint rustle of her uniform fabric brushing past indifferent passengers. Maya's phone buzzed again. Another update. This time, it was from her public relations lead. "We flagged your seating change to our contact at Sky Atlantic. She's forwarding it to the COO. Should we prep a press statement or wait for your signal?" Maya typed a simple reply. "Wait. 10 minutes." She closed her eyes for a moment, collecting her breath. She wasn't emotional. She wasn't shaken. She was calculating. Her silence had never been about fear. It had been strategy. Every minute they left her in that seat, covered in stains and disrespect, was another minute they dug the hole deeper. And when the time came to shine a light on this flight, there would be no ambiguity about who had stood silent. She reopened her notepad and flipped to a blank page. At the top, she wrote, "Flight 727 Systems of Complicity." Below it, She began to outline what would later become the foundation of a viral LinkedIn post, a shareholder address, and a call for corporate policy reform. Maya sat still, her blouse stained, her composure pristine, and her notepad open in front of her like a declaration of future war. Around her, the energy had shifted once more, not from guilt, but from validation. The silence of the crew had given permission. Now, the passengers who had been unsure, who had watched with furtive glances and hushed tones, began to speak with more volume, more boldness, more entitlement. A few rows ahead, a man in a crimson polo shirt leaned over to the woman beside him. "I don't know what the deal is with her," he said, not bothering to whisper, "but if she's going to make everyone uncomfortable, maybe she should be moved to a separate section." The woman nodded, clutching her designer purse a little tighter. "I paid extra for a peaceful flight," she said. "I didn't sign up for some social experiment." Maya heard every word, but her expression remained unreadable. It wasn't new, this form of distance wrapped in politeness. She had been made other, in 100 different ways in rooms across the world. Today was just more public. A middle-aged white woman from across the aisle leaned forward and tapped the shoulder of a flight attendant walking by. "Excuse me," she said, "is it possible for me to switch seats? I just don't feel safe with all this tension in this row." The flight attendant, clearly caught off guard, looked toward Maya, hesitated, then responded, "Let me check what's available." No one questioned why she felt unsafe. No one asked what, exactly, had been done to provoke that discomfort. The request was made, and that was enough. A seat switch was offered. Order maintained for some. Behind Maya, 2 college-age passengers giggled into a phone camera. The phone was tilted just enough to capture her from the side, and one of them whispered, "This lady just caused a whole drama in first class, and now she's sitting here pretending to be a CEO or something. Watch this go viral." The other said, "Wait, say that again. I want to put it on TikTok with text." The first girl repeated the line, louder this time, and added a mock sympathetic pout before hitting record. Maya didn't move. Her posture was still and steady, but inside her, something had shifted. This wasn't discomfort anymore. It wasn't disrespect. It was violence of a different sort, covert, casual, communal. And it was being packaged, uploaded, monetized. Another man in a pinstripe suit reached out from the row in front and turned to face her. "Ma'am," he said, voice low but firm, "I don't mean to intrude, but would you mind switching seats with my assistant? She's quite young, and honestly, I think she'd feel more comfortable not sitting so close to." He trailed off, his face almost apologetic. Maya looked him directly in the eye. "To what exactly?" she asked, her voice razor-thin and polite. He blinked. "It's just, I'm sure you understand." "Oh," Maya said, nodding slowly. "I do. That's the problem." He turned away, flustered, and said nothing more. Row 14 had become a silent stage now, a microcosm of every boardroom, every courtroom, every street Maya had ever walked where respect was not granted but rationed. And she had always been handed the smallest share. But not today. Not for long. She reached for her phone, unlocked the screen, and began typing again. "Confirm contact with news outlets. If crew fails to issue statement within next 20 minutes, proceed with exposure protocol. Footage is already circulating." She paused, then added, "Push draft of internal equity audit. Let them know this is officially under review." Meanwhile, the girls behind her were still recording. "She's on her phone again," one said. "Probably texting the president." They laughed. The man across the aisle muttered, "Probably calling customer service to get a free voucher. They always do that." Someone else added, "She'll play the race card before we land. Just wait." A silence began to spread again, but this time it wasn't from restraint. It was from anticipation. A few passengers had begun to sense that something was off, that maybe, just maybe, this woman wasn't who they thought she was. One man 2 rows back had quietly pulled out his laptop and typed her name into Google. When the results came back, his eyebrows rose. He turned the screen toward his seatmate. The whisper between them was different this time. "Oh my God, I think that's her." The seatmate leaned in. "You're kidding. That Maya Evans." The man nodded. She's worth like hundreds of millions. Tech founder. She was just at that Davos event. They both turned toward row 14 again, but this time with a different kind of silence. Not the kind that comes from comfort, but the kind that comes from the early realization that you might have just watched history treat someone like trash without lifting a finger to stop it. Their guilt was premature. Maya hadn't even begun. At the front of the cabin, the lead flight attendant peeked through the curtain. He glanced down the aisle toward Maya, then retreated, whispering something to a colleague. Another attendant picked up the intercom, said something under her breath, and stepped into the galley. Maya watched every move. Could it be true? The whisper had started 2 rows back, then jumped diagonally, carried by passengers who had suddenly grown curious, now hastily searching the name Maya Evans on their phones, comparing the face on the screen with the woman sitting only feet away from them. The disbelief on their faces shifted rapidly into something more dangerous: realization. The 2 college girls who had been filming earlier had gone silent, their phones now in their laps. The recording paused, their expression stiff. One of them mouthed to the other, "Shut it off." The man across the aisle, who had mocked her intellect earlier, was now sitting bolt upright, his eyes flicking between her stained blouse and the image of her Forbes cover glowing from his iPad. The color drained from his face as he exhaled slowly, whispering, "Oh my God." Maya didn't need to stand. She could have remained seated and let the tension thicken until it collapsed on itself. But she chose not to. She closed her notepad calmly, adjusted the cuff of her blouse, and rose from her seat with the poise of someone about to address a boardroom, because that was exactly what this had become. Every whisper had made this a room of decision-makers, whether they knew it or not. Every glance, every snide comment, every act of silence, they had all cast their vote. And now, she was going to deliver the verdict. She stepped into the aisle, steady and unhurried. Conversations dropped to murmurs, then stopped entirely. Even the buzz of the engines seemed to fade. Maya turned slightly, facing both directions of the cabin, her voice neither raised nor strained. "Since most of you seem quite invested in who I am," she began, her tone clear and razor-sharp, "allow me to formally introduce myself." She paused just long enough to let the words settle. "My name is Maya Evans. I'm the founder and CEO of Ardentix Financial, a multinational fintech firm with over $3 billion in managed assets and a major shareholder in the Sky Atlantic Group, the parent company of the very airline you're flying on today." A visible shudder rippled down the aisle. Someone gasped audibly. In row 12, the man in the crimson polo dropped his phone. The woman next to him placed a hand over her mouth. No one said a word. Maya continued, her voice unwavering. "I booked seat 1A 3 weeks ago, confirmed it, and paid for it in full. I was removed without consent, reassigned without cause, and publicly humiliated without apology. I've endured demeaning comments, careless service, and targeted disrespect, some overt, some cowardly." Her eyes swept across the faces, now avoiding her gaze. "And I remained quiet because I wanted to see how far you'd let it go." The male flight attendant, the only one who had shown a shred of decency earlier, stood near the galley, his eyes wide, posture rigid. Behind him, the brunette attendant who had spilled coffee now peeked from the curtain, her face pale, her lips parted slightly like she was preparing an excuse she knew wouldn't work. Maya's gaze didn't linger on them long. She turned back to the passengers. "To those of you who stood by and said nothing, you showed me exactly the kind of company Sky Atlantic has cultivated. To those of you who mocked, filmed, and ridiculed, thank you. You've made my report to the board far more compelling." In first class, someone finally stirred. The man sitting in her original seat, seat 1A, stood slowly, clearly realizing the moment had passed from awkward to career-ending. He moved down the aisle toward her like someone stepping toward a judge. "Miss Evans, I had no idea," he stammered. "If I'd known," she held up a hand, silencing him without a word. "You didn't need to know my name to treat me with respect," she said, her voice sharp but calm. "That's the entire point." There was a beat of silence, heavy and full, before someone clapped, once, then twice. It was Jonathan Klein, the finance VP, who had recognized her earlier. He stood from his row in 10A, offering a slow, deliberate round of applause. "About damn time," he muttered. A few others joined in, but their claps were nervous, half-hearted. Maya didn't acknowledge them. She didn't need their applause. She hadn't done this for their admiration. She had done this for the truth. From the galley, a voice came over the cabin speaker, nervous, shaky, female. Miss Evans, this is your flight supervisor, Amanda Chapman. Would you be willing to join me at the front for a discussion in private?" Maya turned toward the speaker, as if it were a person standing in front of her. "No, Amanda," she said evenly. "We'll have that discussion in writing, through legal." Someone choked on their drink. The tension was no longer thick. It had cracked wide open. Maya returned to her seat, slowly, like a general returning from the front lines, not victorious, but undefeated. She sat, opened her tablet, and tapped a file labeled Sky Atlantic Equity, Review Confidential. A few passengers watched the screen over her shoulder with awkward reverence. No one said a word now. Even the two girls behind her had their phones tucked away, their posture suddenly apologetic, like they were waiting to be called out next. Maya sat composed in her seat, her tablet screen casting a soft white glow across her face. She wasn't scrolling social media. She wasn't writing angry tweets. She was reviewing something far more powerful. The file titled Sky Atlantic Holdings Acquisition blinked open. Page 1 marked with a signature that now terrified half the people within 10 feet of her. Maya R. Evans, Chief Executive Officer, Ardentix Financial Group. The man 2 rows behind her, the same one who joked earlier about just anyone sitting in first class these days, was now craning his neck to see more of the document. When his eyes landed on the legal stamp in the upper right corner, denoting the transaction as completed and pending shareholder publication, he paled visibly. His voice caught in his throat before he muttered to his wife, "She owns part of the damn airline." His wife didn't respond. She just stared straight ahead, clutching the seatbelt across her lap like a lifeline. At the front of the cabin, whispers began moving like wildfire. "She's not just a CEO, she's one of the owners. This flight's hers. Literally. We're on her plane." The words weren't dramatic. They were factual, plain, unavoidable. The smirks that had once floated around her like flies had vanished. Now there was only the slow, dawning horror of realization. And Maya didn't flinch. She tapped through slides with practiced ease, highlighting asset distribution, equity structure, and stakeholder alignment. The kind of material only an insider would have. The kind of access that only someone with executive power could present in real time. Every page she opened was a nail in the coffin of everyone who had laughed at her, doubted her, dismissed her. Her phone buzzed again. A secure alert from her board liaison. Media outlets receive tip from third party. Story has leaked. CNN Business and The Times are requesting comment. Statement pending your go. Maya typed, "Hold press for 10 minutes. Upload flight log to private investor channel. I want them to see the raw data first." She tapped send, then calmly folded her hands and looked ahead. At that exact moment, a new presence entered the cabin. A man in a dark suit with a polished air of corporate legal. His lanyard bore the Sky Atlantic Executive Clearance Badge, and his face was already tight with tension. He whispered briefly to the lead flight attendant, then turned toward Maya. "Miss Evans," he said, voice low and formal, "would you mind stepping into first class? We'd like to address this matter privately." Maya stood slowly, every movement deliberate. "There's nothing private left to address," she said clearly. "The matter is now public." Passengers leaned in, phones no longer recording out of mockery, but from awe. The brunette attendant who had spilled the coffee now stood frozen, her posture stiff, her mouth slightly parted as she watched Maya step down the aisle. Each row she passed was a gallery of remorse. Eyes dropped, faces flushed. Some tried to nod at her, as if that would erase what had already been said. Maya ignored them all. When she reached the first-class curtain, she turned around, not to leave, but to speak. Her voice filled the space with finality. "Just over 2 weeks ago," she began, "my firm finalized an equity acquisition of Sky Atlantic Holdings. worth $275 million. The deal includes rights of executive oversight, priority shares, and policy recommendations. As of this morning, that deal officially cleared international regulatory gates, which means that effective now, I'm no longer just a shareholder. I'm a voting partner. She let that hang in the air. No drama, no theatrics, just truth delivered like a hammer. In a few minutes, she continued, some of you are going to receive emails from this very airline, and some of your names are going to appear in incident reports. Those of you who participated in today's behavior, through action or through silence, will likely be noted. Not because I'm angry, but because the future of this company deserves better than what I witnessed in this cabin today. Someone near the back muttered, Jesus Christ. Another passenger whispered, she's not playing. The brunette attendant tried to move, perhaps to interrupt, but her supervisor, Amanda Chapman, held out a hand, signaling her to stay back. Amanda's face was pale now, and in her eyes was a dawning fear that had nothing to do with corporate penalties. It was the fear of being seen, truly seen. Maya turned to the man who had summoned her and said calmly, I'll return to my original seat now. He hesitated, but nodded. Of course. As she stepped back into first class, the cabin parted silently, as if even the air understood the shift. The man in seat 1A had already vacated, standing awkwardly near the galley. He gestured toward the seat, trying to summon an apologetic smile. Maya didn't take it. She simply sat down, opened her tablet again, and resumed her notes as if she had never been moved. The cabin had grown colder, not in temperature, but in atmosphere. The first-class lounge, once filled with low chatter and confident laughter, had gone utterly mute. Across from her, the man who had claimed her seat earlier now sat in 1C, fidgeting with his wristwatch, his knee bouncing involuntarily, eyes darting from his phone to the floor, unable to look her in the face. The rest of the cabin was no better. Screens were lit not with entertainment menus or spreadsheets, but with inboxes, each ping and vibration carrying a consequence. Within minutes of Maya's announcement, a string of encrypted internal emails had been auto-distributed to all staff involved in the flight. The first wave was HR protocol, immediate incident flagging, employee behavior audits, and temporary suspension notices pending review. The second wave hit select passengers, formal warnings for disorderly conduct, digital receipts requesting written statements about the in-flight events, and in 2 cases, pre-litigation advisories tied to libelous video content recorded without consent. One of those went to the girl who had filmed Maya and posted it online with a mocking caption. The other to the executive who had ridiculed her intelligence and uploaded a falsified version of the seating dispute on a private travel forum. The brunette flight attendant, Samantha, as her name tag revealed, received her notice first. Maya didn't need to see the email to know it had arrived. She saw it in the woman's eyes as she stumbled out of the galley, pale, mouth agape, phone clutched like a live wire. Amanda Chapman, the supervisor, stood stiffly nearby, her screen open as well. Though she tried to maintain composure, her shoulders had begun to drop in defeat. She had known this was coming. She had chosen to protect her team over protecting the truth. And now the company she thought would shield her was no longer hers to depend on. One of the off-duty attendants who had been sitting near the emergency exit earlier, the same one who had laughed when Maya was humiliated, received her notice next. Maya watched her read it in real time, her hands trembling slightly as she scrolled, lips pressed tightly together. She blinked hard once, then turned off her phone and stared at the back of the seat in front of her, her jaw clenched, her future shifting in front of her eyes. Passengers who had mocked Maya had begun receiving their own digital reckonings. The man from 14D, who had called Maya just another entitled type while laughing at the coffee spill, was now silently reviewing a corporate behavioral policy document with a red banner reading, Passenger Conduct Violation, subject to review and potential ban. He glanced up, caught Maya's eye for half a second, then immediately looked away, his throat bobbing as he swallowed his pride with more effort than he had ever used to speak it. The 2 college girls who had filmed and posted the video stared down at their devices in disbelief, one of them whispering, "Oh my God, it's real, she really reported us." The other hissed, No, this is from corporate. She didn't just report us, she owns them. One of the girls tried to approach a flight attendant with a nervous, forced smile, asking if they could maybe speak with someone from PR when we land, but she was politely redirected with a neutral response. Everything has already been documented. In the cockpit, the flight crew had been notified of the incident. Captain Ellis, who had thus far remained silent in the matter, received a direct message from the airline's risk compliance team. The message was short: escalated incident involving equity partner. Full report required post-flight. Ellis exhaled deeply and muttered, "Damn," under his breath, then turned toward his co-pilot with an expression of reluctant respect. "Should have stepped in sooner," he admitted. His co-pilot, a younger woman with sharp eyes, nodded. "Yeah," she said simply. "We all should have." But it was the silence that came after the notifications that spoke the loudest. The jokes had ended. The subtle glances were gone. Every fake smile had slipped from every face. The weight of Maya's presence wasn't just tied to who she was. It was what she represented. She wasn't the exception to the rule. She was the rule now. She was the standard, the measure. The reminder that power didn't always arrive in noise and force. It could walk in quietly, sit in 14C, and watch the entire machine collapse in on itself without raising its voice once. Maya received a final message from her legal team. Confirmed. 3 employees flagged. 5 passengers recorded. Incident logs archived. HR requested input for training overhaul based on transcript. Ready for your formal response. She replied with 2 words: proceed professionally. As the flight prepared for descent, the captain came over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll begin our descent into San Francisco shortly. On behalf of Sky Atlantic, we thank you for flying with us and appreciate your patience. But his tone was changed. He no longer sounded like a detached professional reading from a script. There was a pause, then, and we especially thank those who carry themselves with grace, even when others forget what that looks like. Maya allowed herself a small smile. Not satisfaction, not revenge, just acknowledgement. Just a line drawn in the sky that now belonged to her. As the plane touched down, wheels humming against the tarmac, Amanda Chapman quietly approached Maya's seat. Her voice was soft, no longer managerial, no longer defensive, just human. "Miss Evans," she said, "I understand if you don't want to hear anything from me, but I do want to say that I'm sorry." Maya looked at her, measured her, then nodded. "Then show me. Don't say it. Fix it." Amanda nodded quickly, understanding. "I will." Then she stepped back, rejoining her crew, her posture smaller than it had been hours ago. As the cabin doors opened and the first rays of California sunlight poured into the jet bridge, Maya rose from seat 1A, her movement fluid, purposeful, and unmistakably composed. She gathered her belongings without hurry, thanked the senior attendant with a courteous nod, and stepped into the aisle, leaving behind the echoes of tension, shame, and silence that had followed her throughout the flight. The air outside was cooler, lighter, as if the act of landing had lifted more than just altitude. It had grounded the entire experience into something real, undeniable, and permanent. Passengers disembarked behind her, their steps slower than usual, their expressions subdued, not because they were tired from the flight, but because each of them carried the weight of what they had witnessed, what they had allowed, and what they had ignored. By the time Maya entered the terminal, a small group of corporate representatives were already waiting. Her team, along with Sky Atlantic's executive liaison, a woman named Claire, who offered a handshake that was firm, apologetic, and without excuses. "Miss Evans," Claire said, "we've initiated the internal review you requested. Amanda Chapman has volunteered to participate in the retraining framework and to co-lead the inclusivity reform package you outlined." Maya met her gaze evenly. "Good. That's a start." Claire nodded. "She asked to speak with you privately before you leave." Maya hesitated for half a breath, then said, "Tell her I'll give her 5 minutes." Later, in a quiet conference room with floor-to-ceiling glass and a view of the runway, Amanda Chapman entered, no longer in uniform, but in civilian clothes that made her appear smaller, more grounded. She didn't sit. "Miss Evans," she began, "I won't ask for forgiveness, and I won't pretend I didn't know what was happening. I was tired, and I chose convenience over courage. That won't happen again. Maya listened without interrupting. Amanda continued. You asked me to show you, not tell you. So, I'm here to tell you. I already submitted my resignation. Not because I'm quitting, but because I'm going back to start over, from the bottom. I want to be retrained from the ground up, so if I ever lead again, I'll do it right. Maya studied her, then said, You don't need to resign. You need to rebuild. If you're willing to do the work, you can stay. But not in the air. Not yet. Amanda blinked, stunned. Then where? Maya stood, walked to the window, and said, Ground operations. Direct passenger service. I want you at the center of the new training model, where people learn how not to become who you were yesterday. Outside, the rest of the crew exited in pairs. Samantha, the brunette who had spilled coffee, avoided the group entirely, exiting through a separate service door. But Maya had seen her name on the final review sheet. It didn't say terminated. It said suspended, pending education and reevaluation. Maya hadn't chosen to fire her. Not yet. People weren't always born cruel. They were shaped by systems that rewarded quiet prejudice and penalized discomfort. That was what needed to be dismantled. In the days that followed, the video from the flight spread across platforms. But it wasn't the mocking clips that went viral. It was the full confrontation, followed by Maya's speech in the aisle and the revelation of her ownership. The public reaction was immediate and loud, but also mixed with something rare, reflection. Comments didn't just express outrage. They carried confession. I've judged people like her too fast. I watched this and realized I've stayed quiet in rooms where I shouldn't have. She didn't embarrass them. They exposed themselves. Within 72 hours, the hashtag #MayaTakesFlight trended globally, not just as a symbol of justice served, but of growth demanded. At Sky Atlantic headquarters, Maya was offered the option to step in as interim chair of the board, a symbolic offer of restitution from the company. She declined the title, but accepted a more impactful role, head of ethics and passenger equity oversight. She would not become the face of punishment. She would become the architect of change. The flight staff involved were given 3 options: resign, retrain, or speak publicly about their experience and use it to educate others. 3 resigned. 2 chose silence. 1, Amanda, stood at a press conference weeks later with Maya by her side and said, We all want to believe we're the good guys. But the truth is, goodness isn't passive. It's what you do when it's hard, when it's unpopular, when it costs something. She paused. Maya didn't humiliate us. She gave us a mirror. Some of us looked away. I won't again. Maya didn't clap. She didn't smile. She just stood there, calm and unshaken, because this wasn't about her. It was never just about her. It was about a moment that revealed a pattern, and a woman who decided that survival was no longer enough, who demanded transformation, not just for herself, but for everyone who had ever been quietly pushed to the back without cause. Months passed. Sky Atlantic's training program was rewritten from the inside out. A new code of conduct was implemented. Passengers began seeing more diversity in leadership and more humanity in service. Maya never once used the term revenge. She didn't have to. She used design, structure, policy. She built a legacy not out of bitterness, but out of blueprint. And for those who once whispered insults, who averted their eyes, who laughed a little too loud at someone else's expense, they remembered. Every time they boarded a plane, saw a leadership poster, or read the name Evans Initiative on the in-flight safety pamphlet, they were reminded not of their punishment, but of their lesson. They had been lucky. Maya had chosen to lead with grace, not fire. Not because they deserved it, but because the world couldn't afford another generation mistaking silence for neutrality. The end. If this story moved you or made you think differently, don't forget to like and subscribe for more powerful narratives like this one. What part of Maya's journey hit you the hardest? Was there a moment that made you stop and reflect? And where in the world are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. We'd love to know.